Welcome to the session after lunch, and we are on understanding your users and designing for their needs. So a little request before we get started. If any of you have train tickets, ideally used train tickets, it would be great. We were expecting you to be all sat around round tables, but clearly they knew lots of people were going to come, so you're all sat in theatre style. So we don't quite have enough of these, but there will be an exercise involving these. So if you have used train tickets, we'll be making use of those later on. So it's my great pleasure to be chairing this with Myles Runham. So we've 3 sessions we've done so far, something like that. So we get on very well together. In fact, when we met up just before Christmas, I don't know if you noticed this, we were wearing almost exactly the same clothing.
No,
it was all the same colour.
Sorry about that.
So
I didn't
get the memo today.
So next time.
But yeah, I should say, I'm Rob Hubbard, so I've always designed things, I've always been a designer, various forms, so it's a real privilege to work with Myles. So Myles is ex-BBC now for a number of years, and Myles helps organisations at a strategic level to make more of user experience design thinking approaches, and just have more of a design mindset to solving the problems that they have. So without further ado, I shall hand over to you.
Thanks, Rob. Oh, actually, this isn't just Rob Hubbard. This is the award-winning Rob Hubbard.
Don't tell me what the award's for.
It doesn't matter. You're just an award winner.
It was fancy dress.
That's just a detail. Hi, everybody. Thank you. Do remember, if you, I don't want to feel sort of obsessive about train tickets, but if you do have a train ticket or a tube ticket, I know they're kind of rare now. It will be relevant later on for a couple of exercises. So there are things for you to do, as well as hopefully some things for you to discuss and listen to as well. So I'm going to talk to you and ask you to think about understanding your users and designing for their needs, which is the first of a number of statements of the obvious that I'm going to share with you. I'm now less nervous about sharing statements of the obvious because I think actually we probably do less of it than we should. So I'm going to give you a little bit of an introduction to myself, which Rob really has done. Talk about points of view on what a user needs and what a user does, something about stakeholders. This idea of the 3 Ps, which is if you're thinking you need to know how to start thinking about user experience, there's a few ideas there that I think can be helpful with you kind of finding your feet, or you might already have your feet, in which case you can just get started. Some thoughts about how you might organize around that. So what does a user-focused team look like? What does a digital team look like now? And what kind of skills and experience you need? And then we're going to spend some time on the theme of empathy, which is where the train tickets will come in. Train tickets and empathy might not go naturally together. And as I say out loud now, I realise that might be quite an odd thing to say, but we're going to try and work that out. So I'm an independent consultant. I've been doing that for a couple of years now, mainly working on themes of digital strategy, this grandiose phrase, digital transformation, which can mean a dangerous number of things, but means digital's happening, what do we do about it in the main? A lot of product strategy, product design strategy, and content strategy, and really which leads to this idea of user experience. And user experience is a thread that runs through most of my professional life for the last 20 years, really started working in digital when it was called the internet back in the late 90s. And then through management consulting, I spent 7 years in the search engine industry with Ask Jeeves and Ask.com. And then at the BBC spent 8 or 9 years in BBC Learning, which is the education service on content and services for school students and for teachers. And then the BBC Academy, where I was the head of digital for what is effectively the BBC's learning and development function. So as a note that you'll be active, you need to be active and to participate, okay? I know I'm going to say that, keep saying that, just so that you've got nowhere to hide when it comes to that point. So, the first question, and really this is probably the theme, is why don't we always do what users need? It's a kind of obvious thing to do. Every service or every piece of content that we make has users. You might call them learners, you might call them colleagues, you might call them staff, you might call them audience. But in the end, those are the people that we're trying to influence, trying to delight, help, change, help them figure out. That's the kind of the key to where we need to get to. And I think that's what I'd like to try and unlock is some of the themes behind that and some of the ways that you might do that. Does anybody got any idea? Does anybody feel bold enough to say, why don't you always do what your users need?
We don't know.
They don't know what they need. Or you don't know what they need. You don't know what they need. Well, sometimes they don't know what they need as well, actually, which is where some of those interesting themes of development can come from.
You don't talk to them enough.
You don't talk to them enough, yeah. So you don't know who they are, you don't know really what they want, you don't know the context. Any others?
Fear of failure.
Sorry?
Fear you might fail.
Fear you might fail. Interesting. But you probably, if you don't know, then you're pretty likely to fail, I'd say. So, yeah. But that's a good point, actually. It feels uncomfortable and different. There was another hand over here. Hi.
Because someone important thinks they know better than users what users do.
Excellent answer, which leads us to... That's very good, thank you.
Brilliant
It's
segue.
very good. I'm going to ask you again, I'm impressed. So you said because someone else has asked you to do something that isn't necessarily in line with what users need, or they don't know what users need. That, to me, is that this notion of the stakeholder view, and I think in learning and development, not just learning and development, but lots of functions within an organisation, we spend time and effort dealing with the desires, plans, and objectives of stakeholders. Stakeholders may or may not be wise and in touch with your users and their users. Frequently they're not, they have other preoccupations. They have a particular view of the landscape of the organisation. Often it's kind of at a distance and at a height, which is helpful. You need to. You know, lots of planning needs to take place in that guise, and lots of kind of, I suppose, the digesting of information and data needs to happen from that point of view. The challenge is that's very rarely the user's perspective. It's a great way to start, but users, we have a different view. We have time pressures, we have conflicting and competing demands, we have different tools, different content. We might not know why this thing is in front of us. So I think it's really, really important to recognize that from a user's point of view, even if you can't necessarily just say to your stakeholders, I'm not going to do that, but in fulfilling a stakeholder request or demand, it's vital that you get down to the user level, which is where we'll get back to that point of empathy later on, to understand the user's perspective, their motivations, their needs, the language they use, which is a really, really important point. Very, very often your audience and your users will describe things and use a language that stakeholders never use. Stakeholders aren't, I've never come across a piece of user research with someone saying, what I really need to do is synergize the strategic alignment. Very, very rare that your users are going to say that. What the user might say is, I really, really need to understand how this piece of software works because I've got to write a presentation about it for tomorrow morning. So it's really, really important to get to your user needs and understand their perspective. Because, this is a statement of the obvious, and it might be not quite so obvious, but in my mind, it's users who are really in charge. If ever you're working on a digital project of any kind, it might be a piece of content, it might be a training program, it might be a change management program. If you have an audience or users who are the target of that, now they have a choice to do something else pretty much all of the time, which is why everybody references YouTube as a learning resource. 10 years ago, it wasn't a learning resource. Now, people can find out anything they want at any time. There's always competition for expertise and for knowledge. So I think it's really important to recognize that your users are in charge. You may compel them to do something, and that happens a lot, but in those instances, their satisfaction and their outcomes will probably be not as great as they could be if you design their requirements and their motivations and their needs in from the beginning, which is really what user experience is about. It's about understanding user need from the outset and then attempting to meet that need as you go along. That's really at the heart of everything. So putting users at the heart of that strategy, this is something that over time has emerged as, for me, very grandiosely calling it the 3 Ps. It's actually 2 Ps and a V, but that didn't sound so good. So I've called it now the 3 Ps. So the idea is that there are three steps you can take early on in any initiative, hopefully right at the very, very beginning, but you can revisit these throughout. This will help you put user understanding, user needs, user motivations, etc., at the heart of what you're trying to do. So the first is purpose, or vision and purpose. And this is significant to set the long-term direction of what you're trying to do. This might be a new thing you're making, or it might be a new application you're making. It might be a new application of a technology that already exists. It might be a new project. What's this for? Why are you trying to do it? Test against that as early as you can, and then find your best route to that. It may be this is a 2-year vision. It may be it's a 3-month vision. It may be that it's a very modest. Actually, it's something you just need to get away and get cleared up. It's also really important to come to a set of principles for yourself, but also the people you're working with, and crucially, if you can, with stakeholders as well. Set the principles for your content, for your product, for the service, whatever it might be. how are you going to go about this? What kinds of principles will you use to decide what's good and what's bad? Some rules to guide you. So they can be very simple, and we'll come to this in a minute. They could be very detailed. It may be something as simple as, well, we're going to do this mobile first. That's one of our principles. This is going to be a mobile first project. Or it might be that the most important user principle is time is the most important pressure they're under. It could be a number of different things, but those are the principles that you can revisit and help manage. And then a series of personas, which is really, who's this for? Who's this for? Why do they need it? Crucially, why do they need it? What barriers and problems do they have? So I'm going to talk through those a little bit in turn. There's many different ways of coming up with a vision statement, and there are conferences and whole 3-day events, I'm sure, that you can go to understand it. This is one formula that I find particularly helpful. Often this is a formula that works for something that's quite new. So for a defined user group, so who's this for? This thing, product name, or kind of, it might be a name for a placeholder name for it, is part of this product category. So this is the kind of family of activity it's part of, which is important in this context, that offers some kind of differentiation, which means that a user gets a benefit. And I would say those last 2 points are, these are all important. Those last 2 points are really, really easy to overlook. You can make a product for a defined user group that's part of a category, but it doesn't actually have a meaningful differentiation, and there isn't a motivating benefit. So that's where the next steps come in. So let's give a couple. So here, I've got a couple of examples here from some work I've been doing recently. These are generalized, so they're slightly softened. So for all hospital professionals, DigiHealth is the first choice digital healthy lifestyle guide that offers practical, real-world, evidence-based advice to support patient needs. This means that positive patient outcomes can be met easily and with confidence. So that was the result of a number of different workshops and research, etc. One of the most important words in that was confidence. So this was an audience, a user group that were low in confidence on this particular theme and needed support with that. The other thing that was really important was evidence-based. So something in your vision statement, some things will chime more than others, but they have to be built on that user understanding. This is a different example from the advertising industry. So I'm not going to read it out, I'm sure you can read. The most important words for this one, I think, was that there's this benefit of showcasing, which is really significant, somewhere where people who are new to the industry can show what they've done. That was a really motivating benefit. The idea of learning built on the insights and experience of the makers of the best work, that's a really, really important differentiator for this particular product. And this was also directed at everyone in, but also particularly aspiring to join the advertising industry. So again, there's nothing necessarily magical about these statements, but that kind of construct can help you focus on the kind of who it's for, why it's motivating, and why it's important to them. A persona, and I think personas are probably, there's nothing new. Given that there's nothing new, I've just stolen this from usability.gov in the US. The Government Digital Service in the UK has lots of really useful resources on this topic as well. The idea of a persona or a number of personas is really to give you a realistic representation of who this is for. And it's a realistic representation that helps you decide what you need to do. And it's also crucially, this is the last point, it's probably the most important of them, it describes real people with backgrounds, goals, and values. So it's a kind of portrait of your most important user groups, maybe 3 or 4 of them. More than 4, it starts to get confusing. The idea is that you can paint a portrait of who you're designing for, what their motivations are, but crucially, it's got to be based on real evidence. Anybody can make up, and this is back to the stakeholder challenge, anybody can make up the personas of the users they'd like to have, because then you can delight them, but they don't exist. So it's really, really important to sort of challenge yourself and challenge each other. Again, that can come back to the principles. That might be that kind of evidence base from testing and research is a really, really useful principle to build into your work. So the last of those 3 Ps then is principles. So these guide how you work for your users. And again, it's working for your users, not working to them or at them or on their behalf. It's really for them in their service. They help you guide you towards that vision and make it a reality. Hopefully, they should help you focus on the things that really make a difference, that really matter. And again, matter to users, which can sometimes be different to the things that feel important from other parts of the organisation. You can steer important decisions. Quite often, actually, refereeing disagreements can be quite helpful with principles. You can go back a few months later and say, no, hang on, we said mobile first, and now we're designing for designers who've got two massive screens, etc. As well, one of the most important things about principles is it can help you guide what you're not going to be. which is quite helpful. There's lots of different choices. Technology and content can be applied to so many different objectives. It can be helpful to know what's out of scope, and the principles can help you to do that. So these are some slightly normalized from this was an example from some strategy work we were doing at the BBC Academy, I don't know, perhaps 4 years ago, 3 or 4 years ago. Again, lots of these are statements of the blindingly obvious, but this is exactly the right time to come up with statements of the obvious, to agree them and write them down and have everybody saying, yes, that's an obvious point that I'm going to hold myself to. So digital first, mobile first, etc. were quite useful. Then we started to get into some things that could actually become more meaningful. So we measure what we do, and our decisions are informed by data. That was a very, very helpful principle. It means that don't make something that you can't get data out of, so that when it's used, you know how it went. Flexible yet consistent. So that was an interesting debate about the notion of the one-stop shop. There's lots of people selling one-stop shops downstairs, which in this instance wouldn't have been helpful. It would have been taken too long, and it would have cost too much money. We needed to bring things together in a way that worked in a sensible manner. Less is more was an interesting one as well, where we had the opportunity to do too many things and we needed to focus. Standardization was a really important one at this point, and I think it's a really important one for everyone, is just use what's there already. Browsers work very, very well. They have known features, etc. So these were very, very helpful steps for us in understanding where did we want to take the BBC Academy in the next major step of developing digital services. So hopefully that's made a little bit of sense. You now have the first of 2 tasks. So what I'd like you to do is, and we were going to do this round tables, as Rob said, but we don't have the tables. So I guess what we'll do is it probably in time-honored fashion do this kind of, maybe in pairs or in 2s and 3s, just to spend a few minutes thinking about digital learning experiences. I've made the assumption that everyone in the room is interested in something to do with digital learning experiences. I don't know. Hopefully that's true. If it's not, then just pretend. And just to take a few minutes, we won't necessarily take 10, because I think that would work with the tables. But just to list out quickly, or just agree with you, what do you think are the most important principles that you either wish you'd had, or that you think are significant, or that you want to take to your work? So you're thinking about the broad theme of digital learning services for your users. What kind of principles do you think would help you in your work decide what you should do, what you should make, and what you shouldn't make? Is that okay? Yeah? So what I'll do, if I put the BBC ones back up, hopefully you can all read those okay at the back. And then if you just talk about that, and then we'll call on a few people. Thank you. Wow. I'm going to keep talking until you slow down. Excuse me. Sorry, I have to stop you.
Can I just say how absolutely awesome that is to come back after lunch? Like, normally it's really difficult to get people engaged in doing stuff. You're all just so up for it.
Thank you.
It's awesome.
Thank you. Although, just as a reminder, actually, you do need to listen to me as well as each other, just in case. But thanks. It's really great. That got conversation started immediately. So if maybe I'll put those BBC ones back up just as a compare and contrast. So I guess it's just very great to get some feedback of how it was. Was it easy? What did you come up with? How familiar it was? We have a microphone if anybody wants to chip in, because you did talk a lot then, so someone's got to say something now.
Well, we decided that we were actually in the wrong room, but anyway.
Okay. Oh, that's okay. No, you're very welcome.
We've decided that we're not very sophisticated with this, so we just put down a couple of things. First and foremost, simple language, plain English would be good.
Great.
And easy access. That's as far as we got.
No, they're great. That's why it's interesting with principles. So when I started working on this kind of thing, I started to think, but that's too simple, it's too obvious. But it's not. The point is that these are things that kind of just help you find your territory. And the plain language, plain English is really good. This is a 2 days where plain English is really required. Jargon and buzzwords are dangerous. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. We were talking and we were discussing, actually, you mentioned English, and that was a key word, because for truly global companies, we're facing a challenge, what is not only the language barrier, but also the cultural barriers as well. So what it may work from a digital or mobile or whatever you want to call it, the new methodologies that may work for Western Europe and North America, may not exactly work for the rest of the world.
Yeah.
So in a world that we are all pushed to reduce cost and to be fast and to adopt new technologies, then you find yourself using many different flavors to be able to reach all your users. So that is a dilemma that I would like to hear from you guys, how you see it, how you cope with those situations.
Yeah, I guess when I was working on this project with the BBC, we had an issue around language for the news services, where a lot of the news services are in languages that no one in the team could speak. So they'd be in Arabic or in Urdu or whatever. And so we tried to adopt the principle of the most, local language relevancy. So, if we'd use English because it was more efficient. But if that didn't work, then we had to do something different. And then we brought people into the team to help, the kind of localization. Not so much the translation, but it was really about the localization. Does this really mean something to that group and that audience? Yeah, so it was that became a principle to us, was kind of local understanding, I guess. But there can be a resource problem with that, because sometimes that's expensive, particularly with content. Yeah. Hi.
One of the things I think digital can allow us to do, and therefore we should do, is design thinking, I like to call it frictionless learning experiences, where the less barriers you have, the better. So for example, how many taps, how many clicks for someone to get to what they need, and thinking of always making that the lowest number possible.
Yeah, so I think that's a kind of effort and time are really, really important principles, because there's always a user pressure. Everyone's frustrated, everyone's impatient, and we're always comparing whatever we're doing to the last great experience we had, and therefore that's the standard. So yeah, the kind of friction, time, effort, really important. Yeah.
When you're creating something, start with the user in mind, not the content.
Yes.
Because often you've already got content there, or some great internal experts got some content that they think is absolutely fascinating.
Yeah.
And then you're trying to shoehorning it into some sort of digital format. Well, in fact, that's not what the user wants to know at all.
Yeah.
So start from them rather than...
Yeah, that's a good point. I think one of the great things about learning and development is we do love to make content, and we're very good at it, and we've become very efficient at it, and that becomes almost the end in itself. We made something, publish it. Or even don't even publish it, put it in the LMS, and so how's that help? Yeah, good point.
Hi there.
Hi.
We were talking about the importance of testing, and I work for Scottish Fire and Rescue Service, and we do a lot of video content. So parcel of the testing of it can mean the difference between life and death in situations. So it comes down to as simple as can you tie this rope that could potentially save your life from falling? And because I'm left-handed, I couldn't.
Okay, yeah.
So simple tests for everyone.
Yeah, and testing, I think that's a really good point. I would suggest, and it's interesting coming into the industry from digital product teams where you wouldn't do anything if you hadn't tested it, you just wouldn't move. You'd find a test, even if it's a kind of artificial one, you'd find some data. I think it's just, they were less high-pressure instances. But testing can mean lots of different things where you don't necessarily have to do some kind of sophisticated A/B testing. It can be go out with a paper prototype into the canteen, talk to 10 people, see does it make sense. What you've called it, does that say what you wanted it to say? It can be quite simple as well.
You're all just getting me to walk around as much as possible, aren't you?
Yes, my name is Jenna from Denmark. I'd like to ask you about if we have an organization or business with different level of understanding. Maybe the young one is very sharp on this area, but maybe some of the older, very skillful employees have some boundaries. So how are we going to tackle that problem?
I suppose, I guess in that instance, you'd need to find out what are the real boundaries and design to overcome those. I think often we get stuck on this notion of kind of millennial excellence and digital natives, etc. I think there's a lot of instances now where digital tools and content are being used by everybody, and actually they've found a way around that. YouTube isn't confusing for my 80-year-old parents. Facebook is used by 2 billion people, so it's not always, that doesn't mean there's no problem, but I think you need to find the evidence. I think a lot of organizations hide behind that assumption of, but we've got an aging workforce who can't do this. Well, design for them, help them solve it, find out how they can use it. It may take longer, but it's better to find out and design for it rather than just assume it's going to go wrong or do nothing, I think.
I just did a bit of research into kind of millennials and their preferences. There's a really good study by Towards Maturity, which is a meta-study of other studies around millennials' preferences. And the only thing you need to know about the Towards Maturity one was its title, which was No Discernible Difference. So millennials' preferences for learning, it's just good learning. It's our older generation, it's our preferences as well. The difference is we're more likely to shut up and put up with it, whereas they're much more likely to vote with their eyes and their taps and their attention and find workarounds, and if you're really unlucky, tweet about what a dreadful experience it is. So, I mean, I think millennials are brilliant. I think they're superheroes who are going to rescue us from dreadful learning experiences.
Good. There you go. You heard it here first. Does anybody have anything else they're burning to share or ask on the principles idea? Did it kind of make sense? Does it feel like a kind of obvious and easy thing to do? Nothing kind of mysterious? That's because what I was hoping. Oh, sorry, I beg your pardon. I was looking the wrong way. Sorry.
I just had a question about the principles that you showed from the BBC. Could you say a little bit more about the we buy not build? Because that seems to me top right-hand corner.
Okay.
Yep. Given the resources of the BBC, I would have assumed that you would build a lot of stuff in-house, not buy it. So I was just intrigued.
Yeah, that's a good point. A good point. Well spotted. Value for money for your license fee as well. Very important. In a way, what we were saying there actually is that I suppose we use what's available rather than building. So because the BBC is the organisation that it is, it has lots of digital platforms and tools and products and design templates and kind of user testing facilities, etc. A lot of that's there anyway. So our view was, well, we're a learning and development function. Why are we going to go and license and build all this other stuff when we've got really well tested, very, very successful products that are very good at distributing content, making it discoverable, publishing it? Let's use those rather than build something new. So the kind of the buy and build was slightly different. But it also meant, actually, we were saying, well, look, we're not going to go and license the next great thing for this because we didn't believe that. So I think it's a good point. Hi, one more.
Yeah, thanks. With the principles here, if you're working, let's say, for an agency, and you'll change the principles for each project you're working on with different clients and so on. But with BBC examples here, will those principles apply across the BBC, so they're kind of organisation-specific rather than project-specific?
These were kind of digital strategy principles across the organisation and the industry. And the industry definition for this was everybody who works in the broadcasting industry, loosely. It's a bit more subtle than that. So journalists, programme makers, producers, designers, presenters, etc. UK and international. So, I think it's one of the points, I guess, this is where the personas and the principles come together, and the vision, the purpose is the three things together should define your market. So these are the principles to meet your vision. So that, and if you're happy with your purpose, then that should state the market you're in. Who you're. They together, it should give you that kind of sense of boundary. But very often, I think a lot. I mean, it's no surprise that lots of these you could imagine. Kind of cutting and pasting and slightly editing and adjusting, because some of them are just, straightforward. Some of them are very organisation specific. Thank you. Okay, thanks everybody. Thank you for that. Was a very. Sorry, I thought someone was going to say something. Oh, sorry, that's it. What, for me as well? I've got so much more to say. Okay, so what did you come up with? So before we get into the next phase and the idea of empathy. And this is really from lots of conversations I've had with people working in around learning and development, HR and other areas, which is, okay, so that makes sense, but we're an L&D team or we're an HR team. How do we do that? What do you do? How do you make that digital change happen? So this is not. So I've stolen this from this article. I can see it. Hopefully you'll be able to pick up the slides. But from the Atlantic in 2012, it's a brilliant article about how a new chief technology officer came into the Obama election campaign and completely changed how they work. And the guy who hired him said, well, basically this is change management. It's not complicated, it's just hard. So actually, and it's back to those kind of simple principles, that if you want to make this stuff work and you focus on users, solve user problems, solve organization problems with your user perspective in mind, actually that's not complicated. That's kind of obvious, and everybody kind of knows, or you can find out. It's just hard work. It takes a long time. It takes a lot of testing, a lot of effort. It might take changing people around a lot. It might take people learning new stuff. It's hard work. Most good things are hard work, and most things that are valuable are hard work. I guess one of the things I would say, that whilst we're upstairs and not downstairs in the exhibition, there's a lot of people who are selling products and services who say, actually, it's not complicated or hard. It's really, really simple. And I think because the really difficult stuff, actually, in a lot of ways, isn't the technology. The difficult stuff is understanding really what you're trying to get done, what problems you're trying to solve for people, then understanding how to organize yourselves to meet those needs. That's much harder than the technology, I think. Technology is brilliant and will do many, many things. I'm now, after the keynote this morning, I'm expecting there's AI machines who are about to prove me wrong, but for now, I still think that's true. So transformation changes what you do. It changes how you go about it, and therefore, funnily enough, it has a different result. So what you're doing now won't work. If you really want something digital to work, doing what you do now, technologically or digitally, I would say it's not going to work. And I think there's lots of organizations have tried this in a training context, say, what we need to do is digitize our catalog. So you can digitize your face-to-face catalog, and you can make all sorts of different things that are now digital. But you're solving a different problem. People don't want the digital course. They were after the face-to-face experience. Don't digitize it. It needs to be something else. And that's essentially, that I think is, in a nutshell, is why it's hard, because that's a big thing to do, and it's very uncomfortable. So I just wanted to quickly walk through, and this is not, I've tried to digest this into one slide, and I'm now nervous. I'm going to spend ages talking about one slide, but I should have showed more. But these, in my mind, there's kind of 5 areas, and these aren't necessarily job descriptions or job titles. You might break these down into 15 people. You might have only 3 people. It depends on your resources. But these are the kind of roles, I think, that a good digital team needs to fulfill. You need some sense of product ownership, someone who is going to say what this is for, the owner of that vision or purpose, one of those Ps. Good product managers, someone who understands technology, someone who understands users, and someone who understands the business. The business may be commercial, it may be public sector, but those are the 3 things that a good product manager needs: technology, users, and business. You need really, as best you can get your hands on, design and development. So those are the obvious skills. I think there's something interesting, particularly in the world that I guess a lot of people in the room work in, is about coding and development and testing. A typical digital team will have developers in the team. And that's quite rare, I think, probably for people in the room. There probably aren't that many of us in the room who actually have developers in our team. But you have development resources that may be working with suppliers in different ways, coming up with agile contracts from suppliers, etc., where you can get more done with your developers in terms of iteration. There's a lot of crucial roles to play in content production, and I think I've tried to expand this because I think, I suppose we were talking about this a moment ago with, the L&D industry is great at making content, and we'll do it at the drop of a hat. The problem is, I think, we're not necessarily thinking about commissioning and planning, the idea of, well, what's this content plan, what's the long-term value of this? Editorial thinking is really important. That's probably the most important lesson I learned at the BBC, was this idea of editorial thinking. What's the story? Why does anybody care? What are the values of it? How well told is that story? That's really, really important. Also, marketing. I've put marketing in a number of places because I think it's missing very often. People need to know what you've done. And very, very often you'll make something and you'll sweat over it, and then you put it in the LMS and you're done, and you go on to the next thing and no one can find it because they don't know it's there. The digital marketing industry has a lot to tell us about how to let people know what's there, how to find routes towards them. Data and analytics are crucial as well. In fact, I think probably there's possibly the most important, really. So you need to look at data, find out what are the metrics, what are you trying to get done, and how do you measure it? The metrics is a really, really short and simple word, but that tells you, you need to design to make something move, to make a change to the metrics, and then find out, test, and find out. Hi.
Is data analytics after production or during?
This is the whole thing. So this is beginning, middle, and end. So this would be for the whole of the product life cycle, I would say.
So the team for developing or making the content, they do it some kind of
data, I would say, I would suggest. So just to get, so there was a question about, does the data count to everything all the time, I suppose, all parts of the process? And the analytics, I would say yes. Don't take a decision without data. unless you've got a really good hunch and you're very lucky. And then constantly look at your data throughout. Whether that's content, design, project management, whatever it is, data's got to be the thing that drives your decision making.
So you mean the team of data analytics, they design metrics, reporting, and...
Yeah. Yeah, if there is a team. So the good point that it may be that there's only 2 of you in the team, or you might be on your own, or you might have a massive team and you can divide people up to cover these. What I'm saying really with these 5 areas is that you need to manage to make these things work well. It may be that you share them amongst you, and you don't have a product owner and a product manager, it's the same person, whatever that might be. But these are the things I think that are crucial to making that progress in the ways that we described, and because I suppose having a bit more of a sense of, of proper digital working, I guess, if there is such a thing. Project management's obvious, but I suppose, and there's conferences and books and courses on Agile, etc., and Scrum, and there's a whole weird language to describe it. That's one method that's very successful, but really it's a sense of how well are you doing and communicating it. I think there's one really important point I'd like to make about this. One of the things that the product owner can and should do is the stakeholder relations. Because I think, as everybody would recognize, there can be a conflict or a distance between user needs and stakeholder needs. It's a really important skill in the product owner or product manager world to have someone who can speak to the business in a way that makes sense to the business about what you're doing and bring to life that kind of user testing and evidence as well. That's really important.
It might just be worth explaining a bit more
Yeah.
about what a product owner and product manager is, because that's probably the role people would be least
Is that okay? Does that look unfamiliar, product owner and product manager? Are they new words? So typically in I suppose a digital environment, you'd have a product owner, which is kind of almost like the executive product role. So that's where you would set the strategy, often maybe set resource. You'd be the owner of priorities, business priorities, perhaps some of the business metrics, etc., that you need to meet. So that's the kind of the person who says, we're doing this, we're making this, we're publishing this because we have a business objective in mind, and we need to internationalize or grow our reach or whatever it is. So they're the person who has that kind of executive responsibility for the product. And often, importantly, they will manage the time and resource as well, or define the time and resource, and have that kind of executive sponsor role. The product manager then is the person who makes it happen, I guess, who translates the vision and the principles and the purpose into a product design, and probably into a product roadmap, and will call the priorities on what the developers and designers do and don't work for, will interpret the data. They're the kind of ringmaster for a lot of this effort. And they'll be the person who actually kind of makes the product into something, and then decides as and when, where each of the sprints or releases are, and when things are ready and when things need to change. Is that helpful? Is that what you were hoping to hear?
Yeah,
Rob?
it was, yeah.
Good.
But it's just, I think coming from an L&D background, most people have got their heads around what a designer is, a developer, people producing stuff and data and analytics. But there's stuff that's much more around product design, digital product design, that's a fairly new thing coming into L&D now.
Yes, that's true. And as we were saying earlier, actually, the word design has become a kind of a dangerous thing to say in a way. And obviously, for a lot of people, it means content design or instruction design. I think in this instance, what we're talking about is kind of product and experience design. So this is designing something that people can use that helps them get something done. And the product manager is the person who's really responsible for making that work. Okay.
Sorry, can I ask a question?
Yes, please.
Can you explain hassle?
Hassle.
Yeah.
I can explain. Hassle means that, yeah. This is part of the exercise of using plain English, and I've used plain English, and it hasn't worked. The project manager is responsible for dealing with the hassle, really. So it's when things don't go right, when someone's late, you're coming to a crucial moment, you're about to release, and your tester's off sick. What do you do? It's that kind of typical stuff that a project manager would do. In my mind, I suppose I wrote that because in my mind, the project managers I've worked with who are really good, they see the hassle coming and they deal with it and they communicate it really, really quickly and simply. So it's a kind of standard thing. Yeah, sorry, it may look like a piece of interesting digital jargon, and it's just a word. Yeah, sorry, I should have said something else. Would have made it more grand. So we're going to finish off with trying to explore a little bit this notion of empathy, which is really step one in any kind of user-focused design. And it's also actually, it's something you kind of have to do throughout. And I think this is where, I think possibly this is why design thinking has become as important and fashionable as, as it has, and why user experience designers are really valuable now, is because they have roots, techniques and kind of sensibilities that get you through to that kind of sense of starting from a note of empathy with your users. So empathy, it means it's not about you. So it's not about a great learning needs analysis, or it's not about a training program, or it's not about rolling out an L&D system or whatever. It's not about stakeholders either. It's really, really important that you focus, who you need to be empathetic with and for. It's back to these folks in their confusing and complicated world, and it will always be confusing and complicated because everybody I've met is complicated, and most of us, maybe it's just me, the people I know, a lot of us are confused some of the time as well. So I think it's really, really important just to sort of hammer that point, which is hopefully what I've done. So there's a couple of exercises, which is where the train tickets came in. We wanted you to go through to try and think through what kind of, trying to sort of, bring to life the idea of empathy. So I don't know is there anybody out there, do you have train tickets to hand? This has become a vitally important question. If you have a train ticket, what we're going to ask you to do is either in the pair or the group you were in. What we've got. Maybe that was more therapy as well as empathy. That's great. So we got the microphone. So what did you come up with? What's the problem? Run over there quickly.
Maybe just shout out.
Oh yeah, just shout out. Yeah.
Paper.
Lose it. Paper. Lose it. Tear it. Another one.
He brought up something that I had never thought of. There's a whole bunch of information on the ticket for the company that I don't need.
Okay, so company data, not customer data. Yeah.
Magnetic strip.
Magnetic strip that doesn't work with mobile phones, and a few people have mobile phones now. Yeah. Okay. Great. It's hard to fake. Yours is a fake. I printed that myself. Yeah, okay. So forgery is easy, maybe. At the back there? Clarity.
The information you need doesn't stand out.
Yeah, okay. So it's unclear message. Oh, hang on. Sorry, one over there.
There's 2 dates and you can't see which is the date you printed or which is the date you actually want to go on.
Okay. Too many dates. 2 dates. One over here?
Yeah, it's not inclusive. If you're blind, it's useless.
Okay, so accessibility problem. Yeah. Thank you. Your ticket didn't work. Not working is a problem, definitely. Hi.
If you've got 5, they're all the same.
Yeah. So, right. So you can't tell the difference between the Birmingham ticket and the Manchester ticket. Okay, great.
Tells me there are restrictions, but not what they are.
Great. Very helpful. Yeah. Yeah.
I have things that look like tickets that aren't tickets.
Oh, really? Even more from masquerading tickets.
And seat reservations.
Seats and seat reservations. Okay, so you're not even sure what is and what isn't a ticket, which does sound like a problem. Yeah. Okay, another one?
So my colleague here, Katharina, was from Stockholm, and she asked me what STD was.
Okay. Okay, yeah, good. So cultural barriers, yeah. Okay, thank you. Hi.
It's inconvenient to buy. You have to go to a kiosk to actually buy.
Okay. So you need to get a hard ticket from somewhere. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Any more?
Quite busy. It's quite busy. I don't think the text is balanced.
Busy.
There's a lot of data on here that's not necessarily relevant for me.
Yeah.
As well.
Busy and hard to read. Thank you. Hi.
As a user, I think I just want to know what is the next step.
Okay. What do I do next? Okay. You're talking about me in the presentation. You're talking about the ticket. So guys start getting quite defensive. There. So, all right.
As a lazy user,
Yeah. Right. Just make it simple. Yeah. What do I need? What do I do? Yeah. Thank you.
There's no delight. I know that sounds funny, but I don't remember where I did this morning, but I was drawing my hands in one of those things that's like a Dyson, but it wasn't a Dyson.
Yeah.
And then a little digital thing on the top that when I put my hands in, it actually turned into a smiley face.
Yeah, okay.
I was like, that's kind of cool.
That's nice. So it's not, there's no kind of something that you think, oh, that's nice. Yeah, yeah, okay.
So why can't a train ticket make you smile?
Make you feel, yeah. You might be going, no, you may be going somewhere special as well. Yeah. You were going to say something?
Oh, we just had, but it's like one-time use, so you
Okay.
can throw it away.
So kind of, yeah, so disposable and resource heavy or whatever. I don't know. Okay. Oh, God, blimey, you lot don't like tickets, do you?
It's more a kind of general point, but in a world where my kids can borrow 15 library books at once, I put them in a machine and it goes, you've got these 15 books. How can a machine not go, oh, you've got this card in your pocket? You still have to take them out.
Yeah, so there's no kind of ease of recognition.
Yeah, easy way of getting them.
Yeah. I took my 80-year-old mother on the Northern Line on Saturday, and she said, but she lives in Hampshire and her Freedom Pass wouldn't work. I said, just take your bank card and just touch it on. And I was telling her, I said, don't worry, just sit on the dragon. And then, but she just said bang, and it was like, wow. She wanted to keep doing it because it was it's a genetic thing. But it was it's just simple. That's it. And so now she knows. And next time, really simple, really easy, really convenient. Yeah. Thank you. We'll have a couple more.
Yeah. In terms of that, is a ticket on my table, and I am the traveler. There is no problem. It works.
It works.
Yeah.
It just works. Okay. We're going to come to solutions in a minute, so you might want to keep that thought.
Well, should we just say we've got time?
Yeah, okay. Yeah, sure. Okay, so what we have, so things about accessibility, easy to scan, to read. It's physical, which doesn't necessarily make sense now. And also that's kind of wasteful. You can't tell the difference between one thing and another, whether it's a ticket or not a ticket. Actually, between one ticket and another ticket. They're hard to scan, difficult to buy. It's not clear, there are too many dates. So, kind of confusing, difficult. Interestingly, though, for most of us, international issues aside, it's a really familiar thing that just doesn't work very well, but we kind of get used to it. So, unsurprisingly, where's my clicker? So now your next task, and you can do this either as a list or in some guise you want, you get to design, so you're the designer, you've got your user research, you know what the problems are, you've got an idea of what you need, because you are the users, so if you can't figure that out, you're in trouble. So just to think for a few minutes again, how would you improve? You don't have to design a ticket, but what would you do to improve the experience as a ticket holder, as a traveller? So with those challenges in mind, knowing what it's like to be a traveller, what kinds of features or designs or ideas would you come up with to make a better ticket? Is that okay? So do it in the same people, just for a few minutes again, and we'll ask you to call them out again. One more whistle. Okay, everybody, thank you. Sorry, I probably stopped you from designing the perfect ticket, but you'll have to make sure you keep your working out so that you can go and find a venture capitalist to invest in your idea.
Is there anyone here from TfL? That'd be pretty cool.
Yeah, we should have asked that before. Actually, here's one I've made earlier. Yeah, it'd be great. Obviously, we don't have time to see everybody's and show. But if you think you've got something that you think was kind of like a neat idea, or it was really hard, or something important, or what did you think was the most important thing to do? How much is on your ticket? How much stuff is on your ticket? Maybe how much information is on it? Did you do anything? Did anybody make anything? Okay, let's go back to the basics.
It's quite minimal because you know what you want as a user.
Okay.
So identifying what you want and what works for you and making it much more simple in terms of reading.
Yeah. So easy to read.
We've designed something fantastic.
Have you? Good. I'll take your word for it. You look like the kind of person who would, definitely.
But yeah, ultimately, because you're using,
You know exactly what you need. Yeah.
You might not necessarily be able to articulate it, but
Yeah.
working in a group, you come to that.
Yeah, so that's good because you know you can talk about exactly what's most important, so you can design exactly for that. I guess if this was a real situation, you might think, well, kind of maybe is that right? And then you send it out to, just go and talk to some people about it. And you go, no, okay, right, we need the date at the top and the price at the bottom or whatever. You can iterate and test that way, yeah. Thanks. Hi.
We stumbled into another problem.
Another problem?
Well, after somebody mentioned platform information, part of the problem is obviously you have to go to a website to find out what the train is delayed. So maybe a QR code or something that took you to an app.
Okay.
Had live data for that train.
Okay.
What platforms are going to, is it delayed? Because that information's always in like 6 different places.
Yes, it's in the, okay.
So maybe
That's a great idea.
Yeah.
Just on your phone, but then
Yeah.
what happens in your phone's battery?
So I guess that is, as the buyer of the ticket, you're not just a ticket purchaser, you're a traveller, and you'll have other travel needs, and how can the ticket solve some of those needs as well? Yeah. Yeah.
I was just going to say, we got rid of the ticket altogether.
Oof.
We,
Radical. So do other people do that as well?
we threw away the ticket completely.
Okay.
And we, three of us here, two suggestions. One, it becomes a digital thing connected to your device. And the other suggestion was we get rid of the tickets altogether by making the whole thing free.
Oh, wow. Okay. Radical.
Yeah, TfL. Yeah, TfL, if you're watching this.
Radical solution.
You know, I think along the line where you were talking about having an application and you just said, I think that the Swedes and the Danish probably as well, they had a good idea. You have an application that you tell them from to, and then you can pick if it is a train, if it is a bus, if it is whatever it is.
Yeah.
Because from the user point of view, you don't really care.
You don't care. You're a traveller.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You're a traveller.
So you're having
thinking about user perspective, I think that they were pretty clever.
Yeah, that's interesting because you could imagine it then being valid for any form of transport with the right, obviously lots of payment systems in the background. Yeah, but you're solving the travel need, not the ticket buying need. Yeah.
Just if we couldn't get rid of the physical tickets, given people's access to devices, have a recycling area or recycling bin that, as you recycle, you earn money to off your next ticket.
Okay, yeah. So it makes recycling a benefit. Yeah. Good idea. Hi, there's one behind you, Rob, around the other side. You have to move again, sorry.
Just picking up on the idea of the app, the train ticket that I bought, I got an email through going, these are your train journeys. I then went on the app because I should be able to see it on there, and it had no record of my booking whatsoever. Right. So I had to run on the paper system. So although it might be useful to have an app, and my account knew I had a booking, the app didn't know I had a booking.
Yeah.
So that's just a bit of a flaw. There is an app there that will tell you that information, but it doesn't always pick it up.
Yeah, okay. Yeah,
I've been very impressed with the Trainline app, actually. No, I'm not... Oh, it didn't work. It's worked. It's got really well for me.
No, the user's never wrong. That's all. Not in this room, anyway.
So hi to everyone. We didn't quite design a ticket because I'm from Porto in Portugal, and we already have a very good ticketing system. So this is reusable material. We pre-charge the card with a certain amount of money. This has an RFID, so we validate before we enter the train or the tube or bus. And then we have also an app where we can check all the schedules of the buses or whatever. And also now it's in development an app where we will be able to validate with our cell phone and we pay only what we use with that app. So, great. And this only has the information for the user in Portuguese. So I think you can check the portals.
Yeah, okay. So this might be it.
Quite
this
good.
Is the death of the ticket. Yeah, okay, thank you very much. Thanks. I think we're pretty much out of time, unless anybody's got one brilliant idea. Or, okay, a question. Go on then. One quick one before we move on.
Could you explain the relation between the ticket and the content that you explained? Because this is a product. It just shows that you could go somewhere and use it. But you were talking about content design for maybe L&D and something like that. Could you explain the relation? How do you consider this as a content?
Well, I mean, I guess at one level, the ticket has information written on it. That's content. That's informational content. That might, and as people have said, that content might or might not be helpful. It might be for the user or for the company. So that's one simple level. This is a product with content on it. I guess I mean, this is a very simple exercise trying to say, that if you can get in to understand how things work for users, what's important, what's not important, what they need to have, what they don't have, that's the first step in designing something that they'll use and need. So, at a bigger level, that could be then a very complex system, or, so it's really just a very small example of understanding user needs. I would say the information on a ticket is content, yes. I'm you know, happy to argue about that, but I think so, yeah. Yeah, it's information content, yeah. Great, thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you, everybody. Myles Runham.